Hey, hello, welcome everyone. This is the ComicBase live stream. I am Pete Bickford. I am the creator of ComicBase and your host for the next while. And this is part two of trying to cover all the cool new stuff that we built into ComicBase 2025. Last time we tried to cover all the major features, some of the new data entry things, the super copy and paste, the handling of CGC and other comics like that, and obviously the content story. But this time out, I wanted to hit all the little stuff because there was a real focus this time out on trying to make sure that we, as they say in the software game, improved quality of life issues. In other words, all the little things that make the thing just a little lot more pleasant to use, that get rid of hassles, when you're using the program or doing other things. We really spent a lot of time trying to make that be a thing this time out and just, add little bits of magic to the whole thing. So that was a real focus for us, and I want to cover as much of those little things as I can this time out. Before I get into it, though, I want to say hi to everyone who's here. First of all, I want to thank our moderator, Mr. Greg Hecht. Richard Scott is in the house. Welcome. He says, want to ask about comic stands. We're going to hit that one in a bit. Let's see. Mike Beam is out here from Vancouver, Washington. And let's see who else we got here. Xandu Comics from Seattle. Rob Weinberg from the Midwest here. And he says, I just noticed the date says the 27th from today's live stream. I don't know. It's the 28th. I hope everyone's here. Anyway, we'll figure it out. I don't know. It's a very complicated world out here with all this stuff. But anyway, so getting into it, by the way, before I get started, I wanted to have a little bit of news. There is a new build out for ComicBase 2025. So yes, I know we just launched last Tuesday, but we have a slight tweak of it, and it's a tweak worth getting. Normally, these little interim updates, I don't put a lot of emphasis on because they're nice to haves, but they're not super critical in the grand scheme of things. But this one actually has enough little nice cosmetic features to it that I'm gonna hit a couple of these as we go along. I'm gonna say it's worth grabbing if you are of a mind to. So please do feel free to go down to. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get something animated off my screen. Please go down to internet and then check for updates. If you have your preference set to include interim updates, you'll get it automatically. You just say internet check for updates from ComicBase. If not, go to comicbase.com, go to my account, and then registrations, and you can always download the latest version of ComicBase from there, no matter when we're doing things. But the new version is, I believe, build 12.15, and like I say, it's got a couple of nice things. So hope you dig it. All right, some other things going on. First of all, big news, everyone. If you're using ComicBase 2024 still, please, ComicBase 2025 is a free update to all of you users out there. So do download the program. It's going to actually, when you go to check for updates, it's going to say, hey, there's a new version of ComicBase. Please download it first. Those program updates, when they come out, we try to limit how frequently they come out, but once a year, at least, there's going to be a big release, and this is this year's big release. When those come out, you're not going to be getting necessarily new content updates until you've updated to the current version of the program. So do take a moment and just download the new program update first, and you should be on your way. And other things, the physical discs are finally shipping. There was about a week delay on these, and I do apologize for that one, but yes, they are actual real things now, and they're going out the door for anyone who ordered it in physical format. Thank you for your patience, everyone, for that. We actually, right at press time, wound up, it's weird, because in our staging area, we are able to measure how close. Our game every year when we're pressing, especially the Blu-rays over here, is we're trying to take 1,070,000 and change photos and compress them down and make them as nice as they can possibly be while still fitting on 2 dual-layer Blu-rays. And we missed it by a small enough amount that it didn't come off in our press pre-checks, but when we went to actually enter the duplication process on it, we missed it by like a couple of meg. It was some amazingly small number, and so we thought, okay, we'll compress it again harder and be just delayed by a day or two, and we did that. And compressing 1 million pictures takes, as you might imagine, quite a while. And then we compressed too hard, and they said, well, we undershot. Now let's ratchet it up again, and we went back and forth like this, like 3 times, until we finally hit the quality level that was a decent amount that left the discs crying for more space, but still fitting on. So anyway, we finally hit that point, and I do apologize for the delay on that one. But you will be seeing those wending their way towards you now. Of course, you can always download the program, from the links under my account registrations. If you have bought the current version, there's just a green download arrow. Just go ahead and click on that. And honestly, although I am one of those guys, I'm very much a partisan of having the physical hard copy of things in my life. I still buy physical CDs and things like that. But just due to the nature of what we've got to do here, the win, I'm actually going to say, is download it. Don't buy the physical copy, because when you download the software, the whole trick with ComicBase is even when you're buying the 4K archive edition, is we've got to fit everything we can onto essentially 90 gigs worth of space. And if you go and you actually install off of the disks, you're going to use 90 gigs of your hard drive space. But the quality you've got is, again, it's as good as we could make it while still fitting in that space, and you're eating a lot of disk space doing it, and it takes a long time to install. But the thing that you've got going for you, if you download instead, is if you download, we can very quickly give you the thumbnails of all the million plus pictures without taking more than, it only takes about 10 gigs for a full install. And we can give that to you very quickly. And what happens then is, as you interact with the program, it sets it up so it automatically downloads larger pictures if they're available. But then, because when you download, we're not constrained by the size of a disk at all, the download we can give you is actually a much nicer picture than the one that we had to squish to fit on the disk. So I'm taking a hit on my own product here, but it's just physical reality of things. Because you're not probably going to be viewing all million pictures, the best way to go for almost any situation I can imagine is install the thumbnails. That way you've got the reference at a glance. It's there, you look at it, and the second you actually interact with it, you get the nicest possible picture while still not taking a lot of disk space. I'd say, unless you have just a miserable internet connection, absolutely the way I would go. And it's definitely the way I go when I install a new machine anymore, is we don't do disks ourselves in the office anymore. But if you do like disks, we certainly respect that, and we're happy to finally be getting them out to you. But this definitely, it's I think you get a nicer experience if you go download. So I would definitely, recommend that to a friend, which is how I try to pitch all my recommendations. Is, if you were a buddy, what would I tell you? And that's what I would tell you is go ahead and just download it. Okay. Other things going on. Oro Viejo's calling in from the Minnesota State Fair. Unbelievable. Yeah, that is just the coolest state fair. Possibly the Texas State Fair would give it a run for its money, but of all the places I've ever been to state fairs, Minnesota, I'm going to hand them the crown, unless in fried food, I'm going to give it up to Texas, but the Minnesota State Fair is fantastic. Anyway, hope you enjoy it. And Andre is also in the house. Join us, and let me see what else is going on. Okay, so all right. So other things happening in the world. I think that's it for the news. So let's get on to it. Little magic tricks. So this is as much as we could possibly do, talking about the things we did to make the new version just kind of cool. Oh, and by the way, I being a YouTube, malefactor here for not saying, please, if this is the sort of thing you like, please like and subscribe, because it helps us quite a bit. And especially if you're watching this at any point in the next couple of days, please leave a comment in the live stream. Just anything from hi Pete, nice robots, whatever it is, because that's the sort of thing that actually promotes this in the algorithm. And it's good for us to get the word out. As they say, Boris Badnov would say, we could use the publicity. All right. So let me see here. Greg Hex, I just found it annoying that I do check for download beforehand. It doesn't show or indicate. Waiting for the rest of the question, and we'll okay. When we get to the end of that, we'll do. Oh, well, sorry. Richard Scott had a question from earlier on. Let's see. East Coast has 4 jump offs here on the West Coast. Keeps check to see if there's a scan before I attempt to scan. When I go through the hassle, so it doesn't indicate they're successfully up to just a new image appears annoying. If I'm following the gist of that, so I think, and Richard, please tell me if I'm wrong on this one. The question is when when you're scanning new comics and everything. So everything that happens on our servers is real time to us. I mean, so in other words, as soon as a comic is scanned and put into production, you guys can download it. But there's a holding area for data that users submit. So in other words, if you guys say, hey, I've got a scan for a new comic book that just dropped, it doesn't go directly onto our servers because then you could do all sorts of nasty things if there was no filter. No, it goes to our editors first, who then approve the pictures, and then, if they see it, we'll post it up for production. So it isn't so much a time zone difference between being able to see the scan's available as there is it needs to be reviewed by the editors, who typically clear. At this point, we've been pretty good for the last couple of years of clearing the queue every day. So that unless we've had massive, plagues going through the office or some kind of crazy thing, or everyone's at a wedding or whatever the thing, usually if you submit something, by the end of that day, it's going to have been reviewed by an editor, no more than 24 hours. So at which point, then that thing can be downloaded. So I think that's the gist of where we're at on this one. If there's more to the question, please feel free to comment back in, and I'll try to obfuscate less. Okay, so moving on. Little magic tricks. All right, so here's a bunch of little stuff that we've done to try to make life better. And I'm going to switch over to the other screen here and try to make this make some kind of sense from a demoing standpoint. All right, here we are on the other thing. And I'm going to put myself into the show if I can. Okay, there we are. So, all right, so very first thing that is new in this version, and I've been saying I was going to do this literally all year long, and I finally did it, is that when you get going on the whole thing, there is now actually a getting started video to get rolling. So if you've just installed ComicBase to start with, hi there, and there I am, eyebrows and all. But basically, in 5 minutes and 8 seconds, I will tell you how to use all the major stuff in ComicBase to enter your collection quickly. And it's a good thing to do. And wow, this is awesome. This is just a short. I just lost my cursor. That is making this so awesome to deal with. Let me go ahead and just close that. Cursor, come back to me. All right, and you're gone. Okay, well. Awesome. This is live TV. How can you tell? But anyway, yes. So there's a gangster video that you can link right from the start. And like I say, for everyone who goes through this one, I'm going to apologize a little bit, because even though I'm actually, if you just close your eyes and listen to me, I'm talking about like this. Make sure that you click the column at the far left. I mean, I'm going like that slow on the whole thing, but because there's a lot, if you look at the visuals on the whole thing, because there's so much information flying past you, and you kind of got to jolt that into the whole thing, I will apologize right here and now that I'm going to say that when I watch the video, it feels like it's going awfully fast. I'm going to try to put some chapter markers in there later on to try to break it up and let you go back and easily review things. But feel free to pause the video if you want. But the upside of all that is, even though it feels like it's going quite fast, the good news is that we'll hit the basic points of how to use the program and all the basic stuff in 5 minutes and 8 seconds flat. So please give your feedback on that one. Leave comments on the video, please. And we're going to try to use that to inform the other ones. I'm very much trying as we go forward to make smaller videos that don't try to cover the whole thing at once, but cover discrete topic areas, and just one idea, one video, minute or two. That's about it. Just kind of keep it simple, because then, and we've already done a couple of these already, we have a video, for instance, on using the new super copy and paste feature, which you can now see on our website at, if you go to youtube.com and go to the channel for ComicBase TV, you'll see that video right up there. There's another one up there about using the intelligent date fill, the auto incrementing there to very quickly fill in ranges of cover dates and so forth. But we're trying to do more of these kind of like short form videos that just really speak to a particular thing and give nice instructional, benefit. Because as much as we tried in the past to, have live streams, to written documentation, we've any number of other things. Matter of fact, even we've rigged out the help text as you're waiting for things like, downloading an update. You'll notice the progress bars will actually try to trick you into learning things about the program. It's ComicBase is not I mean, we think it's a very simple program for what it does. In other words, it's as easy as it can be, but much like, learning to play guitar, it's like if you want a very expressive instrument or if you want a very powerful program, there is some weight that comes with that in terms of the depth of its feature set, in terms of, like, you say, wow, there's a lot of ways I could go about doing a particular problem. And there's some ways they're faster than others, some ways they're better than others for different aspects of it. And because it can do so much, sometimes it feels like there's a bit of a burden in terms of putting it all together. We're doing our best to kind of lead you through the burden and step you into it nicely, but I guess if I'm honest about it, we tried not to make a program where it's just one big button and there's only one simple way to do one simple thing. We want you to be able to manage your collection as completely as you might ever want to do, and also make it so that if you want to do the easy things are easy. But it's a challenge when you have a deeper program like this to try to bridge that gap. And I'm gonna admit, there is a little bit of a learning curve. We think the learning curve is about 5 minutes and 8 seconds long, but we hope we can get you over the hard part in that time. But that's a thing we are trying. All right, other things that are going on. Faster download. Just to start off, when you first start the program, we talked about doing the download before, and I'm going to switch back camera to myself here for a second because it's not particularly interesting there to look at screens. I talk about downloads. Just right when you start off, we spent a lot of time trying to make it so that when you download the program, that's basically you're going to hit one installer. The one installer is going to install all the things that you need. It doesn't install more than you need. Like the very first time you launch a brand new version, it comes with a stock database and a reporting engine and all sorts of stuff that you'll install once. If you ever install an update, it says, hey, you already got that stuff on your machine. I can give you a very small installer. It's very, very quick to install. We did that a while ago. Well, also, another thing we did in recent years is we made it so that if you go to install pictures, there used to be like there were multiple picture installers you would do in a whole different dialogue for managing pictures in movies. You can still get there if you want to customize where pictures are going and things like that. But more importantly, just when you start the program, after you've launched your one installer, it'll say, oh, hey, looks like you haven't got any pictures on this machine yet. Can I install them for you? And then if so, it goes and downloads the stuff. It gives you nice progress as it's going on the whole thing. And in a couple of minutes, we really trimmed this picture installer down as much as we could possibly get away with to make it so you're really just up and running as fast as possible. I believe our record from bare metal, like installing Windows with it, is something like 29 minutes or something. But I think if you're starting off on like just a mediocre PC and you don't have, you have a decent internet connection coming downwards, really think about 10-15 minutes from when you start. I've never installed ComicBase before to I've got it all installed with all the pictures. On a good internet connection, about 15 minutes. On a bad internet connection, and here's something that, again, it's easy for us when we're all kind of squared away to be out of touch, and so we're very much trying not to be. But we do handle our own tech support, as I mentioned before. And if you have a bad internet connection, for one thing, it's much easier to see it now, because beforehand, one of the things that we did this time out is you'll notice that all the downloads, all the uploads, anytime you interact with the internet, we used to just say, yeah, we're sending something to the internet, or yeah, we're getting something from the internet. And what we've done is we've actually managed to get into that transfer call at a much deeper level so that we actually can give you live status of how fast things are transferring. And so that makes a world of difference in terms of being able to troubleshoot your networking situation. So if for some reason it's downloading 2 gigs of stuff and you see it just clipping along at like and 0.1 meg and 0.2 megs. If it's going that slowly, then yeah, I got a problem with my internet, as opposed to just if a progress bar is just marching indeterminately across, which is what we used to have before. It's harder to say where the problem is, and so it makes a big difference now where you say, okay, yeah, it was able to do the internet transfer really fast, but now something is slowing it up, and it's like, oh yeah, hey, maybe that's my antivirus, and so forth. So we try to give you more clues to speed things along if things are going slowly for you, and we think we're doing a much better job of that this time out. I'm certainly much happier about it, and whenever I have to go back to the ComicBase 2024 way of just saying, yeah, we're downloading a file, we'll let you know it's done, the progress makes all the difference in the world, just in terms of not going out of your mind while you're waiting. Um, Other things that are happening, we shrank down the size of the initial installers. So it because we know that if you're using the quick starts, which pictures, which we very much encourage, we didn't need to lay into making the initial pictures quite as pretty as we need to, if we know that every time you interact with one, you're always going to get a much better picture anyway. And so we very much tried to tailor what's our happy medium between, I can instantly go once I start the program and be browsing all 80,000 titles and so forth, and seeing, nice size pictures. I can make out everything. Everything's good. And also making it so that the download time for that is as small as is reasonable. And I think we'd made it better, some better choices of how we tailored some of that stuff. And we managed to slice about 2 gigabytes off the initial install, which, again, if you don't have the world's best internet connection, can actually take several minutes off what you're doing. Or if some customers we know who have dodgy internet connections out in the middle of nowhere, it can take half an hour off of it if it turns out that it takes an hour to download any length of program. So, but we do think that will make things a lot simpler getting going. All right, other things that are new in this version: minimizable progress bars. This is a user request. Let me see if I can trigger something over here to be able to show this. So let's go ahead, and I'm just gonna bounce over here, and let's kick off something that takes a little bit of time to run. So by the way, so this is a good time to introduce file tools. So file tools, you go under the file menu and go to file tools over here. This gets you to a bunch of just handy things for working with the databases themselves. There's a command to optimize the database file, which is nice to do once in a while. Rebuild lists will go through all your series, your items, and so forth, and basically recalculate everything that is a calculated field, cleans up notes, does all sorts of nice maintenance-y type things on that, standardizes creator names and so forth. Reset preferences, a command that I'll admit I use virtually never, but if you ever need to just make things go back to factory defaults, there you go. ComicBase Database Manager is a utility. It's a company's ComicBase, which will search your hard drive for everything that looks like a ComicBase database and tell you what's in it. If you ever lose your database, where you can't remember where you put things or whatever else, very handy to do. Also nice for cleaning up just old database files you don't have any need for. And we're going to get to this new one, choose media types and database, in just a minute, because that one's big. And then there's, of course, manage pictures and movie. What I'm going to do right now, and this is just for the sake of kicking off a process that is long enough so that it's going to take a little time to complete, I'm going to go and click, let's do series information. I'm just going to rebuild the list here. Now, you'll notice when I come up here, this progress bar is no longer, it's no longer a fixed bar. First of all, I can move it around, but more importantly, I can minimize it. And when I minimize it, until it's done, and as a matter of fact, that was too quick. Let me rebuild this again so I can show off the demo a little fast. So, but when I minimize it, there's a couple interesting things about this. Now, this is a bar that's on top of all the other bars, and so when he's working, you need to kind of let him do his thing, because ComicBase is busy. I mean, that's the long and the short of it. Let me go through this bit right here, but then let's go ahead and minimize it, and then we can go ahead and move on with our day. But let me. Yeah, sorry. We're caught right at the point here. And this is a terrible bit of demo craft on my part, in that the demo it was doing right now, there's a couple of checks it does right at the start, which are just blunt force bludgeoning checks. It's like it's just going to blast the database with a whole ton of stuff all at once before it starts doing the more finer grain stuff. And some of the things it's doing right at the top of the updates of the list over here are things like, I would now like to bulk validate all of the IDs in the database. I'd like to now bulk validate all the, all the dates and so forth. And so those things, there's not a lot of progress to be given. It's just sort of like, we're busy, and we'll get back to you in a couple of seconds. But now, and I think we'll probably be picking this one up in just a moment, we'll get to the point where it's actually grinding issue by issue, at which point the minimizing makes a lot more sense. So again, bad demo craft. I'm a bad demoer at this point for having chosen this one as my hill to die on for this particular demo. But if it doesn't pick up on this one, and it's going to do it like 1 second after I decide to move on. But anyway, the thing you do over here is when you, oh, yeah, and here it goes. And that would have been exactly that. But when you go and minimize, it actually will minimize all of ComicBase away. And so now you can see my desktop, but now I can go ahead and be using other programs, browse the internet, do whatever else I want. And when I go and pick ComicBase up again, it'll bounce straight back up to its normal self. But that's a very useful thing, so that I can go on and move on with life while I'm waiting for it to be done doing its thing. And unfortunately, this is a bit sluggish because, again, of all those bulk operations in the one thing I chose to demo. So I'm going to go back to just the live picture of myself while that rolls. But yeah, so if you are just grinding through long operations, like you're downloading a content update or doing things like that, yeah, it's a nice thing for getting ComicBase entirely out of your way so that you can move on with your life, and then it pops straight up to the main ComicBase as soon as it's done. So kind of handy. I think you will dig it. All right, other things that are kind of cool. Smarter defaults. Yeah, let's talk about that in a second here. I really just, sorry, I'm looking at it right now, and of course it's running through a bunch of other bulk changes on comics now, and I'm like, wow, you really did the worst possible demo of this thing, didn't you, Bickford? All right, well, I'm going to vamp for a second when we go about this one. So ComicBase, one of the tricks with any kind of software that is of any complexity whatsoever is, and we know that whatever we choose as the programmers as the default operation is going to be what most people leave it as, because generally there's way too many settings, too many ways to use a program, too many ways you could play with the formula, that most people never kind of move much beyond the basics. And so whatever we choose as the basic, it better be right, or it's gonna probably get left that way and cause trouble for people in the future. They might call us up later on and say, well, hey, I didn't like things the basic way. And we say, well, you didn't, there's a setting, we could have moved it to something else. And they'd be like, no, because there's a million settings for all sorts of things on my computer. I'm overwhelmed by the entire thing. So why did you set it the way you did? Because it wasn't what I wanted. And I hate to say it, but this is actually a very reasonable position given the overall complexity of computers today and software programs. I mean, I've got, where is it? I say here's an iPhone, right? Lovely little beast right here. The settings on an iPhone and for that matter, your Android, are so complicated at this point that instead of going to a control panel or anything like that and trying to figure out where anything is, I literally, when I go to settings on any of these things, I will literally go to the settings thing and just start typing the name of the thing I'm trying to set, as opposed to trying to navigate 16 layers down into all the dialogues to figure out where's the thing to make it so that, when I'm auto typing, whether or not I hear the keystroke clicky sound or not. It's weird. And so you just kind of put in keyboard sound and just hope it finds the right thing. It's, even like, the infamously simple to use, how could it ever be Apple iPhone type thing? All these things are so complicated at this point that, yeah, I mean, it's terrible. So what we've done with defaults this time out is we've definitely taken a look at a couple of things, and we tried to move them onto things that make more sense for today. Now, we lead you through a number of these defaults. Right when you get started, you might have seen the things saying, hey, just a couple things, we want to get you set up with all the normal stuff, and it leads you through about 3 screens, which says, yeah, and here we'd like you, when you do updates, would you like to use the preferred settings, or you want to customize them? When you are using ComicBase Sidekick, would you like to let it manage your current database? And when you're doing, there's one other screen, I forget what it was now at that point, but we try to basically set about 20 different things all at once for you, but also kind of encourage you to be a little bit educated on what those things are. Those are all the settings that, frankly, in that getting started one, that they're either a little bit complicated to set up. Like, for instance, when you're setting up Sidekick, we want to make it so that it's managing your current database. Well, if you have more than one database, which one's your current database? We finesse that as you're going through it, as opposed to if there was a program that only had one database, I guess that'd be easy. It's that'd be the database. But it's also, at that point, we need to tell you, well, what is Sidekick? It's the companion program that does all the boring stuff for you, like keeping the database updated and so forth. So we want to introduce that whole concept, but we also want to take you through it. When we go to the update settings in that getting started wizard, some of the update settings actually involve, you'd say they're destructive settings, but there's stuff that could actually change data on you. So We have very good reasons for wanting to change data during a content update because we thought it was one thing, or our original information was, for instance, that was Dan Panosian was going to be drawing the book, and then it turns out at the end that it was John Buscema. Yeah, I don't know, yeah. As a result, we want to be able to, when we do a content update, to be able to say, yes, is it okay if during a content update that we overwrite the old data for artists, cover creators and things like that. Now, we don't want, unless we talk to you first, and really discuss it with you, which is what we're doing there. You never want to make a default which is going to change the user's data. That would be bad, right? But that's the time when actually we really do. There's a really strong upside to letting us change that kind of data during a content update, but we want to be able to introduce the concept and lead you through it. That's a lot of what we're doing during those opening screens. Other things that we've done. Let's go back over here and look at the preferences. We've changed some of the basic preferences to just be a little smarter for today's stuff, because we chose the preferences, based on how computers were when we got started, and they're not necessarily that way now. And so we want to introduce, some new settings. Now, with these things, I want to be clear. What we've done is we've changed the default. In other words, we've changed what it is, and if you're just starting new, it isn't necessarily how it'll be on yours, because on yours it's going to be whatever you set it to, unless you change it. But if you were starting new, there's a couple things that are different, and we think they make some difference. So first of all, checking for sales and purchases. All right. So what is this? This is how often does ComicBase, when you run it, go to our servers and say, hey, were there any new things you've added using the mobile app, or any new things that you sold out of your database on Atomic Avenue, which you will now want to reflect in your inventory? So how often do you want to go and ask our servers their new things there? It used to be, I think this was set to either once a week or never. The default is now every time the program is launched. Why? Because the mobile app got to be a bigger deal, and because internets got to be much more stable. And so it's definitely thought that, okay, where once upon a time it wasn't even a sure thing that you would even have a steady internet connection when you launched your computer, or when you launched ComicBase. And also it was considered quite unlikely that you've just bought anything or sold anything. And so, yeah, check for once a week, that's fine. But in the meantime, until you check, it could be that the things that you had sold on Atomic Avenue, if you're just posting your inventory again, things might get out of sync, or you might, be calculating up your collections totals, but without the benefit of knowing that you had just sold your most valuable books, whatever that thing is. So the default is now each time you launch the program, we go and it takes a portion of a second. It's not a long time thing at all, but we just say, hey, any new stuff for user, and then your user ID, and if so, it says, oh yeah, you've just sold the following 14 things on, from Atomic Avenue. Do you want to roll them out of your inventory? Or, hey, we noticed you added the following 5 comic books using the mobile app while you were on the road. Would you like to add them to your inventory? And we do that each time. So that's now defaults to each time the program is launched. Another thing we changed, and this is a feature we added a while back. So if you guys ever looked at your database file, depending on what you've got in your database file, it's between 1 and 4 gigabytes in size. It's a big file. And we'll actually talk about how you can make that much smaller in just a second. But one of the things about it is just like text files, and there's certain types of files that compress very, very well. JPEGs, for instance, like photographs, don't compress very well because in their nature, usually they're in a format that kind of is, it's not quite compressed by its nature, but it does not lend itself to further compression that well. But certain things like text files definitely do. Here, if you've ever taken, like a book, like say you've got a manuscript for a novel you've written, it might be hundreds of 100 megabyte file in Microsoft Word, but when you compress it using WinZip or something like that, suddenly it's about a 2 megabyte file. It's crazy how well those things compress. Another thing that compresses very, very well is database files. So you can take that 4 gigabyte database file, and when you compress it, it winds up being about 650 megabytes. So, just huge amounts of space saving. Now, that comes at the price a little bit of it. It occupies your computer for a little while it's doing that. Now, what we've done, however, is we've made it so that when you exit and you make a backup, so let's imagine that we're going to save 5 timestamp backups of your 4 GB file. That's 20 gigabytes of disk space. And maybe you're using like a laptop with an SSD that doesn't have all that much space. Maybe you don't want to give up that much space. So one thing that's very handy is when you exit and you save those backups, it says, hey, go ahead and compress those things. Well, what we will do now is by default, we look at your processor and we say, all right, look, if this guy's got like a really low-end laptop, not a lot of processor speed, not a lot of memory to go around, it's like the bare spec minimum laptop you could ever do. It's actually going to suck for you to try to compress that file. It's going to take several minutes. You won't be able to use your laptop very well in the meantime, and you're not going to enjoy it. But if you've got at least 8 gigs of RAM, and if you've got at least 8, they're called cores. But if you've got 8, the ability to run essentially 8 things at once, 8 processor threads at once. Sorry, I said cores earlier. I really meant as threads. But if you've got that in your computer's architecture, so in other words, if you've got a mid to high range PC, at least not the lowest PC that you could buy, we then now default to when you exit the program and you save your automatic backups, that it spins up a process and it uses some of that processor speed, while you're doing other things, to go and compress those files down. Now, we only default it to that if you've got the power spare. So, I mean, if you've only got, if you've got like a network computer where it's only got 4 or 8, cores to go around, and so you'll be waiting for the entire thing as you go, we don't default it that way, and you probably don't want to default it that way too. But if you do, we go ahead and burn the speed. Another thing we do is if you've got this turned on, to compress your backups to save space, we also will automatically say, and automatically save it to the cloud. All right. Now, we talked about saving to the cloud a little bit last time. And what that is it's the general idea of, whenever you've got data that's important to you, you want to have it in at least 2 places. But one of those places should not be your computer, right? Because hard drives fail, computers get stolen. Someone was telling about that their wife ran over their computer with their car. I heard that story this last week, and it sounds like it was an accident. And I'm like, I'm dying to hear the exact circumstances as to how that was an accident. But he says, no, it wasn't malicious. It was a mistake. I'm like, okay, someone put something down where they shouldn't have. I don't know. I just wanted to help the guy. I didn't want to get too graphic on how his computer died. But things like that happen to computers. So you want to make sure your precious data is stored someplace that isn't your computer. So when you automatically back up to the cloud, what that does is it takes that compressed backup. You'll notice that option's only available if you said, I'm going to compress my backups. But it then takes that compressed backup, throws the ball over to Sidekick, which is our little helper program, who then starts the process of uploading it to the cloud. And all this, of course, is done while you're busy doing other things. You don't need to wait for it to finish any of this stuff. And it will save it up to our cloud so that you've got it, if something, if your wife runs over your machine, you can just download your latest backup. But it also has some nice effects in that if you're using the mobile app, you'll have the latest version of your data within half an hour of when you just exited your, so if I enter a bunch of books in the ComicBase and I exit, it saves that backup and then saves it to the cloud. Within half an hour, I can look on the mobile app and I'll see those books I just entered, which is pretty cool. Another thing is if I'm going to a new machine and there's a very, very high chance if I've been automatically saving to the cloud that all I got to do if I'm buying myself a bigger, better laptop or something, all I got to do is install ComicBase on the bigger, better laptop. When I fire it up the first time, it'll say, oh, hey, by the way, you've got a cloud backup from earlier today. Did you want to use that for your database? If so, it unwraps that and you're good to go. You don't need to do a single other thing. So very cool stuff. And those are all defaults if you've got the processor speed for it. If you don't, we don't have those on by default. But if you want to turn them on, you certainly can. Just be aware that it will probably be burning a little bit of your horsepower. And like I say, it's everything comes at a certain amount of cost. Another thing I want to point out to this, we didn't change this one, but it's worth noting, is when you go down to your defaults over here, there's the rows display and album view. If you like having like kind of the stamp album view, I'd leave that at auto, because that one, it calculates how many to show based on how fast your computer is. And if your computer's very fast, it ramps that up and down. But there's one that I would definitely suggest. I think the default on this is 5,000, but this is the rows to display in grid view. Grid view is the view that most of our users use to show the stuff in ComicBase. And what I would do is, if you'll actually see different options here depending on how much memory you have. So if you've got, I think it's something like 16 gigs of memory or better, you can actually set this like 2 million. But you could make it so you're basically displaying every single thing in the program at once. But I would go ahead actually and set this, because we've made the grid so fast these days that unless you have a very, very low spec computer, or very like next to no memory in your computer, I would actually set that to 500,000. What that does is it makes it so you basically never need to page. So, what the answer you're looking for will never be on, page 2 of your results. So that's one that I would definitely look at if you haven't done already. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about some other stuff. We talked about smarter defaults. I talked about the sales and purchase. Great. Better reporting. All right. So when we've done a number of things just to make reports just a little bit better. Let me go back to my computer, because I got speaking about scrolling, I have to scroll my notes for the show so I can see what's going on next. All right, so and I'll admit this one came out of discussions we've had both internally and on some of the teams. And awesome! It's sorry, I'm being spammed. Yeah, note to self: turn off phone before going on live. All right. So we had originally, when we talked about reporting, we had the idea of do you want to show just all the issues that do you want to show variants and so forth, or do you want to show both, etc. And this is in a kinder, gentler world where not every damn thing under the sun was a variant. And so let's go to a typical title now. Let's go to Marvel's Spider-Man. Actually, what did we just do? X-Force 5th series or something? Let's go to that one. X-Force 5th series, I think, just came out. Yeah, so all right. So here, this is typical of the modern world. X-Force 5th series has got a 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, etc., 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 etc. And let's say I just care, have I read issue number 1? Have I read issue number 2 in any of its forms? I don't really care whether I read issue 1D versus issue 1E. I just want to know. I'm just trying to collect the darn series for the love of Pete, right? So how do I know what I want? So when you go to reports these days, we did we're being a little broader about how we define variants for reporting's sake, to give you, I think, more of what you're actually looking for. So let's say I'm going to go and I want to print, like, say, an item checklist. There's some options in here where you can say, only show me owned plus regular issues. All right, so what does this mean? What that's going to say is, let's say I own issues 1, 2, 3, 1, 1C, 2D, 5, 6, and 7, some variants of one of the other things. If I say only show me own plus regular issues, it's only going to say, okay, if so, for instance, if I'm listing items in my collection, I'm going to see all those issues I just mentioned, but I'm also going to say, yeah, and you're missing some version of number 2, some version of number 3, some version of number 4, some version of number 5. There could be 10 different variants, but I'm not going to tell you you're missing variant, 3A, 3B, 3, C, 3D, 3F. I mean, that just gets to be an overwhelming amount of information. And so it just clutters up the report too much. Same thing goes if I'm doing a collection overview, which is another of our reports. Really, this is actually the one I like the best for saying whether I've got, series I'm missing or not. So not item checklist, but if I say, what am I looking for? Collection overview right here. So if I say on the collection overview, show me only owned plus regular issues, it will do a nice job of saying, I've got issues 1, 2, some version of version 1, some version of issue number 2, and I'm missing some version of issues 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it it kind of ignores the fact that there could be 50 different variants of each of those ones. All I really cared is saying, have I read the damn thing, or have I got something or not? Beforehand, what happens is we used to just get completely overwhelmed with the idea of, well, there's 73 different variants of issue number 3. How do I know that you didn't want the J variant? And the answer is almost no one collects like that. I mean, you can get, if you do collect like that, just uncheck only show own plus regular issues, and you'll get the old style report where we list every single variant you don't have. But if you don't like going insane, then I would definitely suggest give a look at putting the new only show own plus regular issues in there, and I think you'll find the reports are just magically a lot more than what you really kind of wanted, which is to say, hey, look, I'm trying to read the darn series here. What issues have I not gotten my collection in some version? And so it shows them like that. It's funny. It's a little thing, and it makes just a huge difference in just the overall usability of stuff. Other things going on with reporting. Quick reports. So you guys might have used those. If you guys don't know the feature, the idea is anywhere in the program, I can do a find and so forth, and I can just highlight any number of issues over here. I can right click and say, give me a quick report, or hit F7. And it's going to give me a report of just the issues I've got in my collection. Anyway, this quick report now includes the cost. Didn't used to, and in order to put the cost field in there, we had to give up, again, everything that's in physical format comes at, something comes at a price. So the notes field got a little bit less wide in order to make room for it. But being able to, highlight a bunch of issues that you're looking at and be able to total up the cost was, very important to our customers. So we added that in, and it totals at the bottom. So it's handy. You can use it for anything you're doing a search for. So you could do a find for issues that I've just marked. You could do a find for issues I've just added today. You could do, whatever the thing is, and you'll see that cost field on the report. Other things, speaking of cost, is you'll be able, whenever you do a sales report, if you have been using either ComicBase's built-in point-of-sale system that's in the Pro and Archive editions, or if you've sold books on Atomic Avenue, which is integrated with with ComicBase, or if you've got your third-party sales system is using the e-commerce APIs that we introduced last year with the ComicBase Archive edition. What's possible to do now is you can now, when you print a sales report from those things, you'll also now, when you print the detailed sales report, be able to see the cost of the items that you sold. So in terms of your own accounting of, if you're running this as a business and you want to say, all right, well, yeah, I sold, $16,000 worth of books last month, but what's my cost on the whole thing? You don't have to cross-reference between 3 different systems to find that information. Now that is going to pull the cost information from your current copy of ComicBase for those items, and it also breaks out your shipping and other things like that. So you'll be able to do your tax reporting in a much more reasonable way. All right, let me see. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I want to go to the comments here for a second. So Brian Stewart says, a laptop sat on roof of car, forgot car, backs up, and now gets run over in the driveway. Yeah, my guess is it was probably something like that. Like I say, the poor guy, I didn't want to ask too much. It just felt like it was a sensitive subject. Let me see. And I think, okay, that's about the only comment I think I need to address just at the moment. All right, moving on. Okay, we talked. Let's talk about media types. This is huge. I should have gotten to this one earlier in the program, and I did not. But let's go to back to the demo machine. All right, so you guys probably know that ComicBase will track more than just comic books. It'll books, comic books, magazines, and newspapers. Now, newspapers, a little bit of a controversial choice. I mean, in that there's a lot of data there. And there's relatively few people who collect newspapers in our user base, but the people do do it, like it a lot, and also gives us a place to put things that newspapers of the comic industry. I think like Comic Shop News, I think might be in there. I'm not sure, but there are things that are legitimately newspapery, or the people who collect like the newspapers from like when they were born or things like that. It gives those a place to go in the program, but it almost is doing its job just as much for a lot of other people by moving certain things out of other categories. But anyway, if it turns out that you don't collect newspapers, or you don't collect magazines, or you don't collect books, you can now go ahead and choose, well, which collectibles do I want to have in my database? And there was a way to do this before. It used to be if you'd go and you'd download an update, and right at the very top of the update thing, it would say, well, do you want to update everything or just the following collectibles? And the very first time you said, I don't want to update everything, which once upon a time was the default because it was the only option. The very first time it asked you, say, well, do you want me to get rid of the ones in your the fields that that you didn't just check off this one time? And I think most people who encountered that said, I don't know if I want to get rid of them right away. And so they said no. And so it never asked them again. So ever since then, they've, for instance, if they unchecked newspapers, it asked them, they said, well, do you want to get rid of newspapers? And they said, well, no, I don't think, I'm not sure, So it never asked them again. So they've got 3 million plus newspapers hanging out in their collection, in their database, occupying a hell of a lot of space, but it is still not particularly interesting to you. And the only way in the past to get it to ask you that question again was to go through the update twice, is to say, all right, update, and now, yes, I do want all the things, and then stop the update, and then update again and say, well, no, I changed my mind. I don't want all the things. And then would ask you the question again. And then you could, at that point, remove the ones that you didn't care about. There's a much saner way of handling that now in the database. If you go back to File Tools, remember we talked, so I would get back to this one. There's an option down here for Choose Media Types in Database. And I say for everyone who is watching this right now, take a moment, if you haven't already done so, go down to Choose Media Types in Database, and this will probably, it stands a good chance of making your life a bit better. If you're the average person who we reach out to and we talk to, and before we're doing a tech support session, and we're looking at your database, probably I'd say the default is that we'll ask people, hey, do you actually collect newspapers? And they'll say no. And they'll be like, did you want to get rid of them? And they're like, yeah, sure. If it makes my file, file smaller. Yes, it will make your file quite a bit smaller. Anyway, so go ahead and click on this. And then what you should do is leave checked, or check any of the file types that you collect. So a nice thing that we have over here is we actually put the definitions in as we went. So if I go over books, it says a book isn't just, a book is a bound items which are not comics and not periodical in nature. These include portfolios, literature, and text adaptations of comic books. So you might have been thinking, well, I don't collect books, but I do have that prose adaptation of Spider-Man: A Long Way Home. I do have that prose adaptation of Buffy, and I do have some portfolios. So maybe I'll leave those in after all. Comic books, obviously, are bound material primarily consisting of comic stories, stories told by the blah, blah, blah. This is like the understanding comics definition. It's the one that our editorial staff actually uses, as well as the Guinness definition. So one of our customers famously has got the world's largest database of comic books. And Guinness, in order to have the Guinness World Record for that, Guinness had to come up with a definition for, well, what's a comic book? And it isn't just something that's in comic book size. It is bound printed material which consists of comic stories. So in other words, things like the official handbook to the Marvel Universe, even though they're comic size, do not count as comic books because they have no comic stories in them. Similarly, you might have a magazine size thing, which does, like say Vampirella, which is considered a comic book, even though you'd say, well, yeah, but it's in a larger size, like a magazine size. Doesn't matter because the actual definition does it primarily consist of comic stories. Which is a good segue, by the way, to magazines, which is periodicals, typically staple or glue bound, which do not primarily contain comic stories. So if you've got a magazine, I've got PC Magazine, or Back Issue, or things like that. They might be talking about comics, but they don't have comic stories in them, so they go in magazines. And of course, newspapers, unbound periodicals, primarily focused on news, usually published once a week, and so forth. Anyway, so here's the deal. Go under Choose Media Types in Database. So you get there, go to File, go to File Tools, and then Choose Media Types in Database. Uncheck anything you don't collect. Now, you're not really risking anything here, because let's say you forgot and you actually had a couple of magazines in your database. It's not going to delete those. Even if I say, when I go here and I hit save, it'll ask, do you want to remove all? And it'll say the things that I don't have checked. In this case, newspapers, which are not listed as being in my collection. It'll take a couple minutes. If I say yes, it's going to get rid of all my newspapers, unless I actually had some newspapers that I had marked as being in stock. If I did say that, then it will go ahead and leave those ones alone, but it'll get rid of all the rest. So what's the advantage of getting rid of all the rest? Well, if you're like most people and you don't collect newspapers, it number one makes your updates faster because it doesn't need to download newspapers or mess around with that stuff at all. But just as importantly, it makes your database just a lot smaller. Your database is going to go from being close to 4 gigabytes in size to being just a little bit over 1 gigabyte in size. And when it compresses, it'll go down to, I think, like 450 megabytes or so if you're using a compressed size. So everything in your life is going to get just a little bit faster when you're exiting, making backups, saving to the cloud. Any of that stuff is going a lot faster if you don't have a bunch of data in there which you're not using. So we've made it a lot easier to customize that sort of thing. And it's a fair bet to say that if we expand in the future what ComicBase includes, if say we move into other types of collectibles, you'll be able to choose, pick and choose of those. Which ones do I actually collect, and get rid of the ones that you don't, and just make things faster. Faster is better. All right. Other things that are neat. Little things. All right. So if I come in here, all right, you've seen this one for a long time. As I go in here and I say X-Force 5th series and storyline says Sins of the Past Part 1, if I click on Sins of the Past, it'll do a search for all the parts of Sins of the Past. If I click Ed Brisson or something like that, or Dylan Burnett, it'll do a search for art by Ed Burnett. Well, one problem we had, and we used to deal with this, we used to try it really hard to make it so that this wouldn't get false triggered, but as you're just clicking around and doing stuff, this is actually a pretty good, because there's so much data in ComicBase, there winds up being a pretty big live target area here for searches that I maybe didn't mean to click on, because I was just clicking and I didn't mean to be hitting this. And I also don't want to wait while it does a search for Ed Brisson. So these days, when you click off one of these hypertext searches for things like that, very importantly, it just asks, did you really mean to search for Ed Brisson? And if you did, great, it'll go ahead and search for it. But if you didn't, you say, oh yeah, sorry, it's just a misclick, man. And you save the time that you would have spent waiting for Ed Brisson's total biography to appear. It's just a couple seconds on most people's computers, but it's an annoying couple seconds. We try to get rid of it. All right, what else is going on? Better focus keyboard handling when using barcodes, one-issue data entry, etc. All right, this one here, I can credit at least some of this to the fact that I had to make that intro video, and so I got to see every time I'd be describing on the video, okay, yeah, then you click on here, then you type this, and then that'll happen and so forth. And every time it wasn't exactly the way I expected it to happen, I got thrown off, and I'd wind up doing a new take, and it would just drive me nuts. So during the latter course of the last month or so of doing ComicBase 2025, man, did we ever drill into any of the times when like things were not exactly, and I mean exactly, where I wanted them to be as we were going. So a couple of things. So let's say I'm going to go here and I want to say, well, let's start from the basics. You notice where the cursor is right now. Let's go flip over the machine so you can see it. Just right when you come onto the screen, the cursor is blinking away. Where? Here, right up at the find. Why? Because most likely when I start using it, the very first thing I'm going to want to do is either start beeping in barcodes to go places, or I'm going to start typing in stuff, Captain Marvel, and I'm going to want to go steer around to different things to, switch around to different parts of the thing. And as soon as I get done with that, where's the cursor? Well, if I just typed in a title, it's right there. So because I might be thinking I want to go back to a title. All right. It's a little bit psychic this way. Is all right, I just did a search for something which is going to get me to a title, so until I take further action saying like I'm interested in issue number 2 of Captain Marvel. At that point, where's the cursor? Well, it's not up there anymore. At this point, the cursor is basically, because I've clicked on something, is waiting for me to either select a part of this field, go edit, say, hey, I paid $3 for my copy, or I have 2 copies, something like that. Or it's waiting for me to do what's called one key issue entry, which is if it's a feature in ComicBase where if I go and I highlight a bunch of rows like this, I can just type like a number on my keyboard from 0 to 9, and it sets that quantity of comics for the issues in question. While I'm at it, here, let me go ahead and I'm just going to set these to a couple of different numbers. So let's say I've just bought a run of things at the local garage sale. So I've got one copy of this one here, one copy of that one over there, but I just bought more, right? I can actually also hit plus and minus. So it's going to increment and decrement, as I go, to the whole thing. But the neat thing about this is, let's say you're going and you're entering in your comic book collection for the very first time, and let's say you collect, say, the Avengers, right? All right, so let's go to the Avengers, and I'm going to use the F3 here to jump down to issue, 200, right? All right. So let's say I've got Avengers 200 through 203, something like that. All I've got to do here, if I want to do this kind of thing, I don't have the second printing one there, and I just want to say, oh yeah, I've got them all, and they're all near mint condition. Just highlight them all, hit 1, I'm done. I don't need to do anything else. I mean, it took literally 1 second to set all those guys as being in stock. It's already calculated up what the whole thing's worth and so forth. I just move on to the next box. It's fast as all get out. So very cool stuff, but it relies very much. So the one key issue entry relies on me having the row selected, but not having selected something in a particular cell. So for instance, if I was just, typing in the item description, nice copy like that. Well, now if I type 1, it's just the number 1, right? It's not going to do anything else. So the one key issue entry relies on me having just selected the row, not anything in particular in the row. Anyway, that works beautifully now in conjunction with, say, the barcode scanner, or if I'm going to beep around. And of course, I just got rid of every single last comic book on my on my thing here. So well done. I was congratulating myself on clearing down all my comic books that I had to file before the show, little knowing that I was going to want to demo this. But let's say I just beeped in a comic book, and it'd take me to issue 202 of the Avengers. The second I beep it in here, if it knows that I got to a specific comic book and not to just a title, it will have moved the cursor and moved the highlight right there, so that at that point, all I got to do is beep. I'll have the right thing highlighted, one key on my keyboard to set the quantity, and I'm done. Same thing goes if I've just hit F3 to jump to something. Let's say I want to go to issue number 300, 399, because I can't type. Where's the cursor? It's ready for me to do one key issue entry. So I just hit 1 and I'm good to go. Same thing and so forth. It used to be, before this version of ComicBase 2025, little bit of uncertainty about where the cursor was. And sometimes you had to go and click there in order to make sure that it was highlighted and so forth. Nowadays, it just works right. Another thing that's also very cool is, let me go to a smaller title because otherwise it'll be ridiculous. Let's see. Let's go to Batman and Robin. Okay, sure. Here's Batman and Robin 3rd series. If I want to go Control A to select all, that's going to work. Right as I go, and select the whole thing. Control A is another of these very useful keyboard shortcuts, just like holding down the Control key and being able to select back and forth to highlight or unhighlight different rows. But Control A will much more reliably go ahead and select the entire grid if you've got a grid up there and so forth, and the whole thing just works better. Lastly, if I'm adding by barcode, so for instance, I've got the Pro or the Archive edition of ComicBase, and let me go ahead and actually show the screen. If I'm adding by barcode, it used to be that the very first barcode you chose didn't always get the cursor right back here. So you'd be be sitting there, you'd beep one in, and because it was pulling the picture and doing things like that, depending on whether you had the pictures or not in there, it was a little dodgy sometimes, where sometimes you'd miss a scan, or you'd have an extra, oh no, I got to put the cursor back into the scan field before I go. Nowadays, I can just go beep, 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 beep as fast as I can go, and it's always going to go and be ready for the next one. So like I say, we spent a lot of time just getting this kind of little interactions, especially when they're combined with things like downloading pictures in real time from the archive edition and so forth like that. We got a lot of this done. It's a lot tighter, this version, and I think you're just going to really enjoy it. All right, other things that are cool, better screen usage. So the screen itself used to be that our minimum screen specs were 1024 by 800 high. And that doesn't seem like much. I mean, I'm running this on a 1920 by 1080 screen right now. It seems like that's this is on a little $250 machine. It doesn't seem like that's too much to ask for, except for laptops. Laptops are really important to people, and they make the whole screen usage thing really important. So what we'd see is ComicBase would be running, and more and more people would like, "Oh, I like having my stuff on the go. I gotta make this thing run on a much smaller screen." And so we had to make it so that even the very complicated screens in the program, like here's the edit screen, man, we had to fight for this sometimes. But every single screen of the program can be run on a 728 pixel tall laptop. It's basically the smallest conventional laptop you can buy. Everything runs now, and it's sized so it'll fit on that. We use a large screen area when we can, but we can run on much smaller screens if we have to. Another thing we did is we made it so that you see this splitter area here right at the top. We can make this so that you can show more or less of the top area. If I want to really have big previews and stuff like that, but it comes at the price of I can now show less items in the grid. Well, we made it now so you can size this grid way up. You can make it smaller, really quite small. And another thing about that is when you go up here and I say include value graph, that value graph, and by the way, this is another good reason to grab the very latest edition. I'm going to take myself out of the frame right here because I'm covering up my own graph. This value graph, which is really cool, it shows what the comic has been doing for the last 4 years in terms of value, as well as, hey, I'm looking for a copy. Where can I get it? And so you can just click on that, and it'll take you to Atomic Avenue. And it's like, yeah, there's 4 copies for sale. You can get one for $4.05 all the way up to $4.75. So if I'm looking to fill in my collection or do things like that, or if I just want to check real-time data on how the market's doing and stuff, I can now keep this value graph on screen even when this thing is set to its very smallest height. It used to be if you had this thing and you moved up to the smallest position. First of all, the smallest position was larger than you didn't used to be able to make this top this small, or for that matter, you didn't used to be able to make it this skinny. So we can actually size the window in quite a bit and not lose our controls. You notice how the search field got skinnier as I went in here, and I think I can make this all the way into about there. But yeah, we can keep this whole thing on the screen, and we can make this entire window run in a little tiny screen like that now. So that all works much, much better than it did before. And like I say, we think you're going to dig it, especially if you're working on a bigger machine. And of course, having if you've got a smaller machine, of course, if you've got a bigger machine, it'll let you use the space more. It'll make the graph ever so much bigger and so forth. But it doesn't make it crazy tall or things like that. It uses the space as intelligently as it can. But do download the very latest build of that for the latest with the graph fields, because we managed to move the graph up in the window some, so it doesn't get utterly squished down. If you haven't done it yet, have a look for build 1215, which is we just posted last night, but definitely worth looking at. All right, other things, and I am going to finish out the topic this time. I swear to God. One problem people would always have is it was the whole idea of where the cursor is in the grid matters. Like, so if I click on an individual cell and I say these are some notes, right? I'm editing a cell, but there's some things I want to do that involve a whole row at once, in which case you have to kind of train people that I got to click these far left cells. That is still an important thing, and if you want to do things like quick changing and stuff like that, that is how you select the whole row at once. But we can kind of actually shortcut a couple of these things in some cases. For instance, if I go and I click on the 1B over here, these are disabled fields. I mean, you see how they're grayed out because I can't actually change the issue number directly. If I want to change the issue number, I have to double click and change it from here, because the issue number is really a combination of the issue type, the number, the variation, and the printing. If you put all that together, it becomes an issue number. But you can't change the issue number without changing those individual bits. But because these are disabled, I also know it's not really ambiguous if I happen to click on the item number what I meant to do. And so if I happen to click on the item number there, it actually will go ahead and highlight the entire row, which is kind of like the old pre-ComicBase 2020 behavior, where we didn't have the ability to easily edit individual cells like we do now, but it kind of gives you back some of that lazy but easy selection. So that's kind of a cool thing. And let me see if there are anything else I wanted to say about that. So going back to my notes, scrolling again. We covered the covering media types. No, I think we got it about here. All right, so just a couple more things. So first of all, this is the time of the show where our moderator wants to remind everybody, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you like this sort of thing. We sure hope you do, and tell your friends. And please make sure you subscribe, because we are definitely planning on being more active this year, especially with showing short form videos to talk about individual topics of how to use the program better and how to do cool things with comics. Everything from, hey, I got 2 issues of the same comic book in different grades. How do I deal with it? To discussions on comic pricing and things like that. So we will be doing a lot more video like that. Look for it. Make sure you're a subscriber to the channel, and make sure you hit that notification bell so that YouTube thinks to notify you. And also, don't forget there are ComicBase message boards at forums.comicbase.com. You can also link to them from the what do you call that thing? The program. Yeah, that thing. And finally, we also have a dedicated message thread on the ComicBase message boards where you can request live stream topics. And there's also a torrent for Andre's amazing ComicBase cover catalog, which I believe he's just doing a new version of, like either he just did or he's just doing one right now, because we just updated all the images. Now I think we're up to 1,070,000 and change. Images in the program. If you ever want to see what that looked out printed out, it's insane, but very, very cool. Have a look at that one. I think you'll dig it. All right, and then other things. Oh yes, there are 2 other topics I want to talk about. One, the new mobile app. I was just doing testing on the final code that we got from our developer on that one. There will be a version 3.0 of the ComicBase mobile app. Thank God, finally coming soon. It looks like we're just about ready to submit that to the app stores, and hopefully that will appear in the next couple of weeks. I'll have more data on that as we follow. But that will do a number of new things that people have been asking for, everything from being able to deal with the pro cameras on the iPhone Pros, which is why I have an iPhone, even though I typically use an Android. But the old one had a lot of trouble using the close-up cameras. They're built into those ones. New version has no trouble with that. Also supports a bunch of asks that people have had over the years. And so there'll be a modern version of the mobile app coming up soon that is free for all the people who have the pro or larger versions of ComicBase. All you have to do is go to the App Store and download that, and you'll get that. And Andre says the cover catalog is coming next week at least. Okay, cool. And then lastly, if there's anyone watching this one who has data from other comic book programs that you want to are trying to move into ComicBase. So let's say you've tried one of the lower end programs, you're thinking, hey, I want something a bit more robust, a bit more professional. One of the problems that everyone has these days is, and this was not the fact when we started, back in 1992, you could say something like Captain Marvel, and there was only one series you could have ever been talking about. And so it was called Captain Marvel. Its issues would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, being able to title things and name them was not a massive challenge. It's gotten worse over the years because now there's 11 series for Captain Marvel. So which one did you mean? That's an issue. And then everything's a variant, which does not help at all. And so, it can be more of a trouble than you would ever have dreamed of in years past to take your data. Let's say you bought some other program and okay, yeah, I got this, and I've kind of outgrown it, and you want to move on. But then you think, well, I don't want to rekey all my data again. Well, we'd say beforehand, well, ComicBase can, if your old program can export your data, we can import it. So that's good, right? So we've done our bit, right? It turns out these days, with all the variants, all the title naming, things like that, we're trying to help you more than just taking your data verbatim, because maybe verbatim isn't good enough these days with all the considerations about naming and stuff like that. So we developed some technology to make it so it auto matches much more thoroughly data that comes in from other sources. So if you've got data that's coming in from another source, and you're trying to load it into ComicBase, please get in touch with us. Just write me at support@comicbase.com or pbickford@comicbase.com, and I will hip you to something we've got. It's kind of a hidden feature right now. We're going to unhide it. Right now, it kind of relies on you trying to import it in exactly a certain order. And so if you call us, we'll tell you what that order is. But we also want to make sure that we can make this as robust as possible, this feature. So if you've got data like that and you'd like to try it out, we'd love to see your data. And we'd love to know how good a job we can do with some of this automatic mapping of titles from old stuff and new stuff, because we want to help you as much as possible to move up to obviously our program if we can interest you in it, and we want to ease that transition as much as possible. So worst thing ever is like get stuck in an old program where you realize it sucks, but you're thinking, oh God, I gotta enter all my stuff again. That's no fun. So yeah, if you're watching this and you have data from an old thing like that, reach out to us, and I will definitely be interested in having a look at your data and seeing what we can do to help you out to move that over. And once we've got a better feel for is this as good as it can be, then I think we'll make this a little less secret about how the auto match works. So we'll let you know. Let's see. No Cutler at ComicBase TV. Let's see. Did No Cutler say something, and did I miss it? Looking. No Cutlers. Oh yes. Any chance of a feature where I'm scanning barcodes? It tells me if I already have the book. Yeah, sort of, kind of, a little bit. So what's going to happen if you scan in a comic book? And all right, so remember, there's a couple places where you scan. If I'm just scanning in the main program over here, and I'm up here, and whoops, let me go back. Switch my KVM so I'm actually controlling this one. So if I'm just scanning up over here, you're going to be going straight to that book. So you'll see if you already have it, because it'll be highlighted, or it shows the color and so forth to say whether you've got the thing in stock or so forth. If you're doing it there, you'll see it instantly. If you're doing the batch scans, a little bit more complicated, because having the book already is not necessarily a problem. Like, for instance, I was entering this week's books, and among them, Marvel had sent us, 5 more copies of X Factor #1, as well as replacements for some damaged comic books that they had in already. So it isn't so much that I wanted to get notified that they that I already had the books inside there. It's just I want to be able to deal with it intelligently. It does warn you if you're printing labels and you have more than one copy in stock, you'll get asked, first of all, did you want to print just one copy of that label, or do you want to print for all the copies? But the other thing, more importantly, you'll see is when you see, if you're scanning in the add by barcode and you say to display what you just added, which I'm going to say I always have checked because I'm always printing labels for things that I've done. But if you've done that, one of the things you'll see there is what the quantity is of all the books. So if the use case in question is, yeah, I scanned some books, but I don't remember what I scanned, so I'm scanning the whole bunch again, but I don't want to double scan. If it's something like that is what you're working for, then the thing you'll see is that some of them will have quantity too. Cool thing is you can actually just highlight right down that list, even do the Control A and the set thing. And if you literally just punch 1 for, quick change, it'll blast the quantity back to 1. So if you're somehow double entering a book that you already had, that can put the quantity back to 1 instantly, just as you go, because all the searches, including the show me the things that I just scanned, work the same, and so that should do it. If that doesn't handle your particular use case, get back in touch with me, and and I'll see if there isn't something better I can do to handle whatever the particular thing is you're trying to do with the program. But all right, so hopefully that takes care of it. All right, so. All right, I think that does it. Let me just do one more check of the messages, and let's see, some best scans of the display should work. Okay, awesome, great. All right, guys. Well, that's it for this time. I will see you on the next one. In the meantime, hope you enjoy the new program. Make sure you download it. Just go to internet, check for updates. You should see the new version if you're running still the old version of ComicBase. But definitely check it out and let us know what you think. Take care, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.